What makes comedy funny? Or more specifically, why is it that the most popular comedy coming out nowadays, or ever, has to do with bad things happening to people? Say, slapstick. My old high school drama teacher used to say that the difference between a comedy movie and a horror movie is the background music. And the more and more comedies I see, the more I see this to be true.
Take the Christmas movie Home Alone as an example. Now I know many of us have warm feelings towards this movie, but ignore that for now and just think about what is in the movie. The movie is about a young boy who needs to protect his home from thieves. But if you think about how he goes around doing that, you start to realize that it starts bordering on torture. Now, don't take this as me criticizing comedy or Home Alone. I'm just pointing out something I found interesting about the genre. The reason I felt I had to tell you this is because the anime I will be reviewing today takes full advantage of the darker parts of comedy. So without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the N.H.K. Welcome to the N.H.K. was an anime made by Studio Gonzo in the year 2006, and is based off a manga by the same name. The show is about a man named Sato, who although may look like an average 20-year-old, is actually far from it. You see, Sato is both a NEET and a hikikomori. A NEET is short for not in education, employment, or training, and a hikikomori is someone who chose to withdraw themselves from the social life. Despite this, Sato was content with his life up until he got a message from a girl named Misaki. This message said that she can cure him from being a hikikomori, and after a lot of hesitation, he inevitably accepts her offer, which takes him down the most difficult and unusual path his life has ever taken. And here's where my opening monologue about how comedy and tragedy are two sides of the same coin comes in. This anime is a dark comedy, which uses the current social issues in Japan to create comedy. The perfect example of this is how the show makes Sato face problems that can range from anything from video game addiction to suicide pacts, all for the sake of comedy. All of the characters in Welcome to N.H.K. are broken in some way, and that is what makes them so interesting. Now, I do not have time to talk about all of them, so I will be focusing on the main three characters. The first main character, who I already mentioned, is Sato, who is a hikikomori and is afraid of social interaction. Whenever he is out in public, he assumes that everyone is out to get him and that he is part of a big conspiracy.
He also somehow managed to download 120 gigs of 30 pictures in a day. Pictures! 120 gigs.
Downloading 120 gigs worth of dirty photos?
How many pictures does it take to fill up 120 gigs? And how do you do that in under a day in 2006? The second main character I will be focusing on is named Yamazaki. Yamazaki is an otaku in every sense of the word. He watches anime, reads manga, plays visual novels, and his dream is to be a video game developer and own his own studio. The third main character is Misaki.
Despite her on the outside looking like the most normal person out of the main cast, she is quite possibly the most messed up of the three. This is the part of the review I've been dreading. The animation in this show is so inconsistent that makes it extremely difficult to review. One episode it might look really good, maybe even close to great, but then the very next episode it might look terrible. In fact, there was one episode later on in the series that had such terrible animation that it looked like all the characters had no outlines. Now don't get the wrong idea, the animation is far from unwatchable. In fact, there are points that the animation is really good, especially during the close-ups. The problem is that the animation problems are glaringly obvious. It makes it abundantly clear that Gonzo either did not manage their budget properly, or had a very limited budget to begin with. Also, this is a small complaint, but I really feel that Gonzo missed an opportunity here. What I mean by this is that all through the anime, they were referencing different anime characters, but none of them were real. If they would have, instead of putting out these fake anime characters who just look generic, put out their own shows or maybe just other anime characters, that would have been really cool. But instead, we got a bunch of generic looking anime characters with no defining features to them. I know this is a small complaint, but it's just something I really would have enjoyed. The music in this anime is really good and often will set the mood perfectly. There are some points where the music does not entirely fit, but those points are very brief and they are completely overshadowed by the points where they do fit, and even the great sounding music. As for the voice acting, I really felt that both the sub and the dub tried to accomplish very different things. I found that the dub tried to be more comedic, while the sub tried to be more depressing. This is largely due to very different performances that each two gave. In the North American version, the voice actors gave a much more over-the-top performance, but in the Japanese version, the voice actors gave a much more somber performance. Now, both performances were good. It just comes down to, do you want the show to be more funny or more depressing? It really can go either way. I personally prefer the funnier version, but that's just me. Welcome to the N.H.K is one of those shows that everyone will be able to relate to in some form. Everyone has had those dark moments in their life when they feel like one of these characters. This show takes those dark parts of life and exaggerates them to the point where you can't help but laugh. So if that sounds like something you would like, and you don't mind the inconsistent animation, then you should definitely watch the show. So for story, I'll be giving this show an 8 out of 10 for having a great story that most people will be able to relate to. Characters gets 8.5 for not having any of the characters being unlikable by the end, and for the great character development. Animation receives a 5 out of 10 for having really inconsistent animation that at some points just looks bad, although there are enough good points to stop it from going any lower. Sound receives an 8 out of 10 for having some really nice music and having some really good voice acting on both sides, although they did try to do different things. And finally, I will be giving this show a 7.5 for enjoyment. That gives the show an overall rating of 7.4 out of 10. Welcome to N.H.K was licensed in North America by Funimation Entertainment and currently has a home video release. It is also available for legal streaming on their website, Funimation.com, as well as Netflix and Hulu if you happen to prefer those services. Or if you have already seen Welcome to the N.H.K and are looking for recommendations on what to watch next, then I have two shows for you. My first recommendation is to watch a show called Watamote because it has such similar themes to Welcome to the N.H.K. As for my second recommendation, I will say Neon Genesis Evangelion, the TV series, not the movies, although the movies are good. This may seem like an odd choice to some people because of how far from comedy Neon Genesis Evangelion is, but I really do feel they share very similar themes. And that is all for now. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter, it is @MadBens99, and the link will be in the description. And don't forget to like and subscribe, and I hope you'll tune in next time.